Filomena Tassi, she is the Minister of Public Services and Procurement. She's in Ottawa. Minister Tassi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. My pleasure.
I'd like to start with the timeline here, if I could. I mean, the former Harper government announced they were going to buy these jets in 2010. You guys campaigned in 2015 on scrapping that purchase and having a review. And after all of this time, we find our way back to the F-35. I mean, did the government waste the last 7 years here in terms of military procurement?
Yeah, absolutely not, David. Fair question, but this is what I would say in response to that. In 2016, our government committed to an open, fair, and rigorous process. And that's exactly the process that we are undergoing today, to this date. Really important that you have a procurement process where the proper evaluations are done and capability is looked at, the cost, the economic benefit, and that's exactly what this process has brought us to today. And that was a commitment that we made in 2016. And the procurement process, as you know, was started in 2017.
Right, so you made this commitment in 2016, but if you look at the original plan, Canada was supposed to receive its first F-35 in 2016, and in fact, that original schedule had Canada getting almost all of the jets that it wanted by today's announcement, before today's announcement. So what did Canadians get out of this delay if they still don't have the jets?
Yeah, so Canadians get the peace of mind to know that this significant investment, which is an investment that hasn't been made in the RCAF in over 30 years, so a very significant investment, is based on fact and is based on a process that was rigorous. It's one thing to guess and to say, you know, and speculate. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to move forward with an investment of this magnitude, making sure that we had evaluation that was rigorous, and that's exactly what has been provided and will continue throughout this process.
Okay, you call it a guess, the decision by the former Harper government to do this as a sole source contract, but based on what I saw and heard from you and Minister Anand today, it looked like they guessed right. So, I mean, what was the big new piece of information that led you to this decision that the government didn't have in 2010?
It's the importance of the process. And so when I say that, I mean sole source is very different than a competitive process. And it's two things. The first is to ensure that you are doing the evaluations so that the capability, the cost, the economic benefit is undergoing significant scrutiny. There were 13 evaluation teams from DND, from PSPC, from ISED, and from the RCAF. And those evaluators worked very hard to ensure that all the capability, the cost, the economic benefits, all in place in order to ensure that this was the best way to proceed and move forward with the success of the bidder. The second point that I would raise is when you have a competition, it's very different than a sole source. The competitors, the bidders that are there, are then coming in with the best possible bid that they can make because they know that they are in a competition. So the process in and of itself drives bidders to make sure that they're coming in with the best bid. And there was competition here. We had 3 suppliers who put in bids, and all of those bids were assessed. So the competition was, it worked. And now we are moving forward at the finalization stage, not completed yet, but now we will work towards securing a contract with Lockheed Martin.
But Minister, you say it drives competition and it affected the bidders, but you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but doesn't the original memorandum or the original agreement mean that we can buy the plane at the same price that the Americans are paying in the fiscal year in which we buy the F-35s as a country? I mean, there's not really much to negotiate in terms of price, is there?
Yes, there is to negotiate in price because, of course, that was the cost is 60% of the analysis in terms of what the procurement officials were looking at. And right now, we can't get into details with respect to what the costs are because, as I said, this is the finalization stage. This is about entering into a final contract with the terms, everything specified. And so the process is contingent for Lockheed Martin in terms of reaching an agreement with the government. And so all those items will be specified. Because it's not a done deal yet, that we need to go through this process and ensure that they can commit in writing. We cannot talk about the financial cost yet, but this is all a part of the process as we nail down the terms and make sure that as we move forward, we are moving forward with the best possible bid.
Okay, you talk a lot about process, but the reality is the Air Force still has old planes, right? And if the Harper plan had been allowed to go ahead, the bulk of a new fleet would already be in Canada's possession at this point in time. And instead, when we've got like a major conflict happening in Europe, we're just getting around to negotiations. How do you reassure Canadians on that?
Well, I would say this process is extremely important. When we are making an investment in strong, secure, and engaged the defense policy, this is a $19 billion investment potentially. When we are making an investment of that magnitude, I think Canadians want to be assured that the government has gone through the process, that expert evaluation teams have been put together and have rigorously analyzed to ensure that we are getting the best product at the best price with the greatest economic benefit for Canadians. That is an extremely important process. And so I can tell you as a procurement minister, it's a very important process to me. Canadians want to make sure that we are spending money in a responsible way. That's what this process ensures.
Okay, but a responsible way, but also a timely way. I mean, how quickly do you think the Air Force is going to actually have these F-35s?
Well, we're hoping to sign the agreement. So the finalization stage is a minimum of 7 months. So if we get to the contract that is signed, then the planes will start to be delivered in 2025.
Okay, so that's 15 years after the original announcement. I mean, is it acceptable that procurement of this importance takes this long for the Canadian Armed Forces to get the equipment that they need?
I think, well, they do have the CF-18s now. There has been work done to the CF-18s in order to extend their life to provide the Air Force with the equipment they need. And first and foremost, that's our game. Our game is ensuring that we are providing the Air Force with the equipment that they need. Look, they are sacrificing their lives in order to protect us. We have to make sure that we are keeping them safe and that they have the ability to keep Canadians safe. That's why this process is so important. The evaluations that are done are making sure that it is the right plane, that it has the right capability. And so the process, I don't think you can undermine the process. And I think it's a very different position to be where we are today, where we have gone through the process. All those evaluations have taken place by experts to determine that we do have the right plane for Canadians, for the armed forces.
Right, but just one last question. It's 15 years after the former Harper government announced this, and 9 years from the point which you announced the competitive process before the first plane will be delivered. I mean, doesn't this need to be accelerated if we're going to modernize the Canadian military and respond to what's happening, for example, in Eastern Europe right now?
I would say it's really important, David, to get this right, and that's what we have done. We actually had a phased-in process. In terms of our outreach to the industry, there were 5 suppliers originally who expressed interest in this, 3 submitted bids, and we had a phased process, which means that each of the suppliers had the opportunity to communicate with the procurement officials to ensure that a supplier was not going to get eliminated from the process without having the opportunity to have that engagement, to have that dialogue. You can imagine the level of complexity when you're running simulations, you're making sure that this is the right plane. That can't happen overnight. We do need to take the time. And as I said, when we're spending this much money of taxpayers' dollars, we want to make sure, and trying to protect the Air Force and Canadians, it's critical we get this right. I stand by the procurement process, and I think that the bidders as well were very strongly encouraged, of course, to come in with competitive bids, and that's what the process provided.
Okay, Minister Tassi, thank you for your time.
Thank you, David.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.